And here are results from that study I referenced a few minutes ago, looking at the intensity of small-sided games. And in this case, we observed that for untrained females, we saw very little difference in the heart rate, also in the peak heart rate, and we saw very little difference in the number of sprints performed, number of high-speed runs performed, and moderate-speed runs performed between 2 versus 2, 4 versus 4, and 7 versus 7 for this particular subject group. But there's not that many data available yet in terms of elite female players. We have a lot of data coming up, and already data reported as scientific articles for small-sided game for male players, but still there's something to do within this area for elite female players. However, in terms of organizing intense training activities for sub-elite players and for recreational players, these results are actually very nice, because it tells us that it's very easy to organize intense football training for the general population. And earlier today we even saw results from a study where they looked at balls used in schools made of newspaper. And even that activity was pretty intense. So it's easy to organize football as intense training. We haven't got any data for muscle glycogen utilization in relation to specific muscle fiber types for women, but we do have that for males. And we do observe that a large percentage of the individual slow twitch fibers and also the fast twitch fibers are depleted or almost depleted of glycogen during a football game. And we would expect the same thing to occur for women football players, because in comparative studies we usually see slightly lower glycogen levels in the muscles of women players. And we also, in that previous study, observed that the blood lactates were low towards the end of women football games, and that may be explained by low glycogen values. But we need to investigate this further. In terms of recovering after elite football games for women, Helene Andersen has done several studies and will do more in the future. This is just one highlight. High intensity running distance in relation to the blood, the increase in the blood creatine kinase as a marker of muscle damage. And it was observed that there was a correlation between the amount of high intensity running performed in the game and the increase in creatine kinase, telling us that this is worth investigating further, because there may be a further delay in recovery for players that have performed a lot of high intensity running. And all our elite players, they perform a lot of high intensity running and are fatigued towards the end of the game. So we need to take this into account when organizing training, and also when we have a busy schedule with matches, because it's interesting to know how long time it takes to recover after a game with a lot of high intensity running. In male football players, it has been observed that glycogen resynthesis expressed in percentage of a peak value, where the amount of glycogen is 40% immediately after a game, that the glycogen resynthesis is quite slow compared to many other sports. We know that after a 10-kilometer very high intensity 10 kilometer, we can have glycogen resynthesis after 24 hours. Complete glycogen resynthesis. But that does not seem to be the case for football players. You can see here, after 24 hours, the value is 65% of the optimal value. And even after 2 days, 2 whole days, the glycogen level is not optimal. And that may be due to muscle damage or other factors. And this is a very interesting phenomenon. And this is a terrible picture, really. And why? Yes, because when Sweden played against Denmark in the playoffs for the World Cup, they had very equal matches. 2-1 in Sweden, 1-2 in Denmark, so they had to play extra time. And in the last 5 minutes of the extra time, Sweden scored the decisive goal. They were fitter than the Danish team. And the Danish goalkeeper is not that happy, and I can understand that. But the Swedish players are very happy because they have had optimal physical training, and that's so important today. So people want physical trainers of a high quality. Then they're happy. And that's our challenge, isn't it? And what can we do in terms of physical training? There's a lot to be done. And we have many results from many places around the world that have looked at the improvements in physical fitness of women's soccer players with optimal training regimes. And this is one example from the under 20 years American national team preparing for the World Cup. And that's a long preparation. And they really needed it because the fitness level was extraordinarily poor when they started. But 1 year later, they doubled the performance in an intermittent running test. That's a tremendous improvement. And that occurred for all the players. And what did they do? In this study, it's not very well described what they did, but it was a combination of aerobic moderate intensity training, aerobic high intensity training, speed endurance training, sprint training. And in this study, we don't know really what caused the effect. And additional studies have to be made looking at the specific characters of an optimal training program. In one study, we looked at the World Cup preparation for the Danish national team, and we had a specific focus on 2 types of training, which was aerobic high-intensity training with heart rate above 90% of heart rate max, and also anaerobic speed endurance training. And I can show you some results here. 12 months before the World Cup, they performed well, but not optimally. 14 days before the World Cup, they performed 2,000 meters in the Euro Intermittent Endurance Level 2 test, which is good. And the Start 11 performed 2,200 meters, which is very good. And one player even performed 3,000 meters, which is better than most elite male players. Also in Premier League and other very good leagues. And what did they do? Yeah, they did all those aerobic high-intensity runs, but they also did anaerobic speed endurance training, like it has been described in detail by Jens Bangsbo. And what they did was that they did very high-intensity running for 25 seconds. They did 6 repetitions. They had 4 minutes of rest between them. And they were all performed with the ball. And each individual had her own exercise. Because we wanted this to look like a game. We wanted the players to do very intense exercise with the ball. Because that's much more motivating for the players And if you want to make a shot or a cross at a very high intensity during a game, you have to train it as well. So there were extra benefits from this type of training. And as you can see, for each individual, there were different scopes. The head coach decided about which passes to make, about where to do the crosses, early crosses, late crosses, where do you have to pass the ball to the front post, to the penalty arch. And then the head coach decided to make those exercises with the physical trainer. And then they did this for 3 months before the World Cup. The first months, they only did it once a week with 2-3 repetitions to get used to it. And then we increased the number of repetitions and also increased the frequency during the week, so that they had 2 sessions with anaerobic speed endurance training up till 14 days before the first game. And this activity was recorded not only by heart rate measurements, but also by GPS, 5 Hz GP Sport measurements, to look at the speed of each individual activity. And in this case, we have one example of a player doing a training session with aerobic high-intensity training, speed endurance tolerance training, and then speed endurance production training towards the end. And this is a bit messy, but it tells a story that if you do aerobic moderate intensity training, you don't reach that high speeds, only 15 kilometers per hour. The players think that they are running really fast, but they are not. And you can see that from the GPS recordings. But when you do the speed endurance training, this player reached 23 kilometers per hour. All other players reach 25 or 28 kilometers per hour. That's individual for a player. But at least with those type of measurements, you can also look at the most intense actions, which is a nice tool combined with the heart rate measurements. And this type of training was observed to be very efficient in terms of improving intermittent exercise performance. And the last part of my talk, the chairman tells me that I have another 5 minutes, is about the health effects of football. And as I said, it's interesting to compare elite players with untrained individuals, but it's also interesting to look at the untrained individuals, trying to make them train and to see how much they improve. And we have done that. One example is VO2 max. We have many reports for elite women showing VO2 max values between 50 and 55. If you look at an age-matched untrained, it was 33. So a huge difference, a 60% higher value for the elite training. But if we train 2 times a week for 1 hour, football training, small-sided games, we see a marked improvement in VO2 max. They won't reach elite level in 4 months. They have to train many years to reach that level, at least a couple of years. But still, that's an important improvement, both in terms of performance, but also in terms of the health profile.